let's walk through our assignments for this week because there's a couple of different assignments than what we've had the last couple of weeks. So I just wanted to take this opportunity before we get into our lecture to talk a little bit about that. So if you're on our page and you go into online class assignments for the week, and of course we're going to look at this very first page that has all of the wonderful information on it. Here is where you're going to find this video when I'm done with it. Here is where you're going to find this same video when I'm done with it. But this week you have 5 things to accomplish for me. This one did not format pretty, and that's going to drive me crazy. We'll worry about that later. So number 1 is your lecture notes. Our lecture this week is pretty quick. We're going to be talking about the difference between mood and tone in a piece. Those are 2 literary elements that are very commonly misconstrued for one another. And a couple of our assignments are going to be paying attention to tone. So the notes are quick, but really make sure that you pay attention to how you can identify tone, because that's something that you're going to be using this week in your assignments. That goes in your notebook score. Then for 10 points in your checkpoint score, I've got your reading questions for 11 through 15. I don't have a lot of questions on there, so it shouldn't take too long if you get done reading. This is just instead of taking a quiz. For another 10 points on your checkpoint, I have a Catcher in the Rye Dear Abby advice letter. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dear Abby. She is a famous advice columnist that was syndicated all over the world, and your parents would definitely know who she is. But I'm having you guys write an advice letter to Holden, and we will take a look at that assignment in a little bit. Next, your discussion this week, you only have to post 1 time and respond to 1 person. And in this tone discussion, I'm asking you to compare and contrast tone from The Catcher in the Rye to a short story that Salinger wrote about Holden called Slight Rebellion of Madison. And then finally, one of your content assessments is going to pass on May 2nd or May 4th. And so I'm going to be inputting it into the gradebook. So it's time to take some notes and to pass that content assessment on Summit. If you would like assistance with it, I'm more than happy to help you. You do need to show proof that you've taken notes on that content assessment, and you do need to show that you have attempted to take it 2 times and not passed on your own. After that, I am more than happy to assist you, but I would like you guys to take a stab at it yourself. And additionally, these are my office hours and the links. I have the second half of my office hours reserved purely for juniors. So please come and see me, even if you just pop in and say hi. It's really nice to see your faces. But if you need help with anything, I would love to assist you. Okay, so that's what we got going on this week. Let's look really quickly at a couple of those assignments. The Dear Abby advice letter. One of the things that I have in here is an example of a Dear Abby piece. So this will help you quite a bit. You are going to be Dear Abby, so you are the advice giver. And this is Holden's letter right here, and you are going to respond right here. Major things that I need to see, 3 to 4 paragraphs, not long paragraphs, but 3 to 4 paragraphs, and a closing and a signature like a normal letter. Get creative with it. I do want you to pay attention to the time period. So it's the 1950s, so be appropriate to the time period and to Holden's situation, so you can rely on material from the book, things that you've learned about Holden, and I would like to make sure that your tone is appropriate for the task. Additionally, let's go back to this. Comparing and contrasting tone. This is just a discussion, but you can read the short story that Salinger wrote for The New Yorker here. And it's not very long, and it reads really fast. It's almost got like shorter sentences than in The Catcher in the Rye. So it looks a little long as I'm scrolling, but it's not, because look at all of that dialogue. It goes really, really fast. So compare and contrast tone using some of the tools that we were talking about. And you just need to respond to one person for full credit. So it's 10 points for your initial post and 5 points for your response to someone else. And remember, like, hey, I like your post isn't quite enough. I want you to engage with what that person had to say, maybe ask a question, agree, disagree, and say why. Okay? All right, so let's get into our lecture for this week. Slideshow, present, no, yeah, that works. Okay. So today we're talking about mood versus tone as a literary device, and then we're going to connect it with The Catcher in the Rye. These show up in your content assessments, particularly senior year, which is one of the reasons why we're going to talk about it now. And this was in one of our content assessments for this year that I decided to take away. So that's why we're practicing it this week. We're learning the skill in a different way. So with mood is an overall atmosphere that a piece of writing has. Mood has a lot more to do with how you feel as a reader after you read a piece. So this is all about how the author is trying to manipulate the reader to feel afterwards. So you can be amused, you could be calm, you could be liberated, you could be annoyed, you could be jealous, you could be cranky, you could be dignified. 10 points if you notice that I'm missing a comma between jealous and cranky. Jealous cranky, it's a new type of attitude. I like this Calvin, I've always loved this Calvin mood photo, but this is a great example of mood. Hopefully you're not picking your nose after you read a piece of literature. There's a million different words that you can use to describe mood, but just remember that with mood, it's how the reader is supposed to feel after reading a piece. And I know that that's a little bit subjective, but there are different ways that authors specifically try to create mood. So 5 of them are setting. The way that the author chooses to describe the setting impacts mood. So if it's got an eerie setting and there's fog rolling in and like it's dark, those things matter. If it's light and breezy, those things matter. Style is a big part of mood. So how sentences are structured, the figurative language that they use, do they make it easy to read? Or is it a little bit more complicated to read? That might make you feel different as you're reading a piece. The viewpoint, we've got first, second, third person point of view. What does the author choose to use? Tone, we're going to talk about this next, but tone is a part of impacting mood. Tone is a part of mood. Mood is not always a part of tone. And then lastly, genre. Considering the genre of a piece will help you figure out what the mood should be. For example, if you're reading like a romance, you're supposed to feel good at the end because everybody lives happily ever after. Lyle, I know that's your favorite type of text to read, so you totally understand what I'm saying. And then a thriller should make you feel like a little unsettled, and like a mystery should make you feel like, ooh, who done it? Like I want to know. So considering genre will really help you decide what the mood is. In reality, if you can defend the mood through these things, if you're saying the mood is X, Y, and Z, and here's where it is in the setting, here's where it is in the tone, here's where it is in the genre, you're going to be right. You just need to make sure that you've got the evidence to back it up. Okay. So when we look at tone, it's different, but it's just different in the slightest way. So tone is not necessarily about how you feel after reading a piece. Tone is a lot more about the author's attitude towards a subject. And we actually talked a lot about tone when we looked at our op-eds, and then when we looked at Barbara Einreich's piece in Nickel and Dimed. We talked a lot about the author's attitudes, and in those pieces they were nonfiction, so they were writing about some specific topics that they definitely had opinions on. And so that is a little bit unique to nonfiction. When we're looking at tone within a literary text like The Catcher in the Rye, then we're really looking at the emotional state or the attitude of the speaker or the narrator. So for us, that's going to be Holden, right? So we're going to be looking at Holden's attitude towards things, which he definitely has an attitude, that's for sure. And that's going to really help us identify what the tone is. Tone can be all of these different words. We've talked a lot about saying like it has a positive tone, it has a negative tone, and how we really need to move away from just using positive or negative. But describing tone really has to do with identifying the overall feel and then putting the right word to it, okay? So tone is developed through a handful of things. Tone is developed through the word choice of the narrator. We see a very clear example of specific word choice in Holden. Not necessarily always good because he's got a filthy mouth, but he loves the word phony. He loves to cuss about things, and that really does impact the overall tone of the piece. It gives us a sense of his attitude. Sentence construction of the narrator. What kind of sentences does Holden use? He gives us this interior dialogue, and he also gives us, well, I guess that's more of a monologue, and then he also gives us this exterior dialogue when he's talking to other people. And then what the narrator chooses to focus on. Holden's got a lot of opinions about a lot of people and a lot of things, and that helps us lead to an idea of what the tone might be. And then the narrator's perception of and reaction to sights, sounds, odors, taste, touch. Tone can change over a story, particularly as a character changes and develops over the time. You will have to decide if Holden's tone changes at the end. I'm interested to see what you think. So when we're thinking about tone or when we're thinking about mood, in The Catcher in the Rye, we want to remember that it's how we feel when we rate a piece. And so a lot of people tend to feel that it's dark, that it's bleak, that it's very informal. Maybe it's a little depressing, like Holden just seems to be whining the whole time. It's a little gloomy. There's this darkness that kind of follows around Holden as he's struggling with being in between the adult world and still feeling like a child. And as I mentioned, if you can defend it through the elements we listed before, these elements of setting, style, viewpoint, tone, and genre, it's probably right, as long as you can defend it with these things. With tone in The Catcher in the Rye, it's a little bit different because we're not looking at how we feel. We're looking at how Holden is reacting and how Holden is talking about things. So some words that I would probably use for tone: sarcastic, judgmental, longing. Holden clearly wants relationship and wants something, even though I don't think he's even fully sure of what that is. It's nostalgic, as Holden is really dreaming of childhood, and it's very cynical. So these would be some words that I could use for tone. It's not necessarily the only words that are appropriate for tone. So as you work through your assignments this week, consider how you see tone, particularly through these elements in The Catcher in the Rye. And then when you look at the rebellion piece and you're comparing and contrasting, how are these things the same and how are these things different? That's really what you're going to want to highlight in your paragraph. And I think if you can do that well, you'll have a good understanding of tone. So if you need help with anything, please come see me at my office hours. If you can't make those office hours, shoot me a message and I'm more than happy to find a time that we can get on a Google Hangout. I miss you guys. I hope you're doing well, and I will look forward to talking with you soon. Bye.